Medicaid is a health insurance program that provides medical help for people with low income. But unfortunately, many people manipulate the system and take advantage of this program. Many do not have low income and should not qualify. This results in Medicaid fraud, a crime that affects all of us. Well, joining us today to discuss this topic is criminal law attorney Todd Spodek. Todd, thanks for being here, first of all.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Let's just start from the very beginning.
Sure.
When we say Medicaid, what do we mean by Medicaid?
Sure. So in reality, Medicaid is just an organization that is a conduit for health insurance for indigent people. It's not actually a healthcare company. It's really a middleman, which is arranging for private insurance companies to give health insurance.
Right. And I assume if somebody meets the criteria and they don't have the means, they will put an application in for Medicaid, right?
Absolutely. So what happens is you fill out an application, you detail who lives in your household, the family size, your income, and potentially your resources. You submit it. The benefits start immediately upon them accepting your application.
Now, that initial application, do you have to provide proof of exactly what's in the bank? Do you own a car? Do you own a home? Is your wife working? Like, what exactly are they asking for?
No, most of the time you're just swearing to it. It's a self-swearing application. So under penalty of perjury, everything you say is true, but also you can't omit things either. So you can't have $100,000 in the bank account and omit to mention that.
Do they search for these things?
No,
they
not
don't.
up front.
All right, so that starts with the process of a
Correct.
possible Medicaid fraud.
Absolutely.
Right. Now, when you're swearing to this, swearing under penalties of perjury, so the viewers understand, what does it mean when you're swearing to something?
Right, so you're signing this application and you're swearing under penalty of perjury. You're taking an oath that everything is true and accurate as of the date of that application. And that's going to allow the organization, whether it be HRA or some other organization, to determine your eligibility. So if you say you make $10,000 a year, they're believing at face value you make $10,000 a year. If you fail to admit that you have a side job as a bartender or a housekeeper and you have cash or something along those lines, they don't know it and you're not being straightforward, the benefits would be fraudulent.
Okay, now you as a criminal defense attorney, you represent a gamut of individuals who end up being accused of Medicaid fraud, am I correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Give me like the example of the type of
Sure, so we represent a lot of people who are recipients who apply for benefits and then are either investigated by HRA for fraud or criminally prosecuted by the DA's office for fraud. We also, on the other side of that, represent doctors who are involved in Medicaid frauds, such as illegal kickbacks or overbilling or bundling services. And unfortunately, healthcare fraud is such a large area, there's really an endless amount of these scenarios.
The Bronx, where we are right now
Sure.
filming, what's going on here?
So we have a lot of cases in the Bronx. We have a lot of individuals who own property with family members. So traditionally, you own a piece of property and you're on the deed, you're on the mortgage. But in certain immigrant communities in the Bronx, 10 people may own a property even though one person's on the deed, and they all may contribute the money, and it all may be cash because they're new immigrants, they don't know the system, they don't know everything about it.
And what happens?
Right,
so explain to me what happens next.
Sure. So what happens a lot of times is someone will apply for benefits and say, I have nothing, basically. You know, I don't have any obligations to anyone, I don't receive any money from anyone, I don't own anything, and claim poverty. But in reality, there is either operating agreement somewhere that details taxes paid by them, or they're paying rent, but in reality it's towards the mortgage, which
Sure.
is a property they own, or their spouse, who's not their legal husband or wife, owns the property. So there's like creative scams.
Now, sometimes it's not necessarily an intentional fraud.
Absolutely.
You know, maybe you get married and now you own joint property, or there's some issues. But it's your obligation to make sure you keep Medicaid aware of what's going on with your assets. Am I correct?
100%. You have an affirmative obligation to update them as things change.
So they don't have to. So you don't have to wait for them to contact you. You have to contact them.
Correct. But they will send you a recertification, which also obligates you to let them know
How
changes.
often does that come?
Annually.
Annually.
Yes.
And again, you're swearing to the same thing. All right. So now, by the way, who is HRA? Just so.
So HRA is New York City's Human Resources Administration. It's a organization under New York City that deals with social services and all types of scenarios with social services. What we're referring to is the fraud investigations, but they're also dealing with other Medicaid issues not fraud related.
Now, you get this letter from HRA, and it says, guess what? We think there may be some fraud. What's in that letter exactly?
Sure. So by the time a recipient gets that letter, an investigation's been done already. Keep in mind, you bump into New York City one way or the other. Driver's license, property records, insurance, your kids are in school. There's always some record somewhere which will come back to haunt you.
You can't be completely off the grid in New York City.
Correct, you can't. So by the time you receive that letter, they've done an investigation. They may have done a field investigation, come to your house, take photos, interview your neighbors, find out where your kids go to school. So it's a problem already. Sometimes it's a manageable problem that could be resolved with HRA, and other times it's going to get referred for prosecution.
Does the letter actually tell you the specifics of the fraud that you've allegedly committed, whether you're the doctor, whether you're the individual, or is it just a form that says you may be in trouble, come into the office, we want to talk?
The letter will say what the issue is. We believe there's been an overpayment due to non-reported income or due to household members that were not included in your application.
And what do they ask you to do?
So
Come on down, right?
Yeah, so what they'll do is they'll detail evidence that should trigger an immediate concern, meaning they'll say, please come to a meeting and bring your deed, your mortgage statement, proof that you live in New York City, or something to trigger, you know what, there's an issue here. And a lot of times people think, you know what, it's not a big deal, everyone does it, it's not going to go anywhere, blah, blah, blah. And that turns into a catastrophe.
So tell me what they should do.
So the truth of the matter is, as soon as you get this letter, you should either have a lawyer contact them or you contact them and schedule a meeting at a good time. The last thing you want is to be rushed into a meeting scared, not knowing the extent of what they're talking about and not knowing your rights.
Is that meeting with HRA recorded? Is there a court reporter there? What goes on there?
So there'll be two investigators from HRA. They'll sit, they'll take notes. But it is a fraud investigation. These are not your friends.
And most people don't realize that. They go down there thinking, oh, I'll just explain it and it's no big deal. But they're building a criminal case against you already.
And you're making admissions. You're literally sitting down making admissions, stating facts that will be used against you. It's no question about it.
Who seems to be, in your opinion, because you've been doing this now, more at risk? Is it the doctors? Is it the individuals? Is it a little bit both? Where is New York really grabbing?
I would say the recipient fraud in New York City is really rampant. I think Brooklyn has the highest levels nationwide of Medicaid fraud, and they are cracking down significantly. They're sending out more and more investigators, they're hiring more investigators, and HRA has an algorithm now that will analyze records to see patterns of fraud.
Give me an example. Really.
So for example, they'll say, if you have on your application a family size of 4 and you live in a certain area, they'll be able to say how much money you would need to survive. So if you're putting on your application artificial numbers, and they could pull up any other records to support that your children are either in private school, you own a car, you're on a lease, you own a piece of property.
So if you're living in Williamsburg, let's say, and now it's a really hot community, and you're living there, and it seems like, well, how are you functioning here, you know, with only what we're giving you? It can't be.
Exactly.
They knock on your neighbor's doors and they say, who owns that car? Oh, it's my neighbor. Oh, it is. And they start taking pictures and they build a case. What are the criminal aspects to this case? So, in other words, what can happen to you?
Sure. So it's obviously a financial crime. There's anywhere from probation to state prison sentences available to the DA's office.
Do people go to jail for this?
They do.
They
do.
Absolutely.
Okay. It's not a crime that is prosecuted the same as violent crimes. It's obviously a little bit different, and a lot of times you have mitigating factors. So you do have immigrant families, you do have people who are new to America, new to New York, new to the benefit system, which works in resolving the cases favorably.
Now, do you continue to handle the case while it's before the district attorney at this point?
Yeah, so my firm covers all aspects of Medicaid fraud, from civil investigations with HRA to state and federal prosecutions for Medicaid fraud.
So what's the best advice you would probably give to somebody who, you know, who first signs that, you know, who gets the letter?
Start from the beginning.
Okay, start from the beginning, again.
Sure. So the best thing is to be forthright and to realize that your scheme, your idea of how this works, has already been done by a number of people. So they're hip to the game. It's not like you're recreating something that's new. They understand this. If you live with a spouse and they're paying your mortgage and you're going to submit a letter that says you're paying rent, this is what a lot of people do. It's very easy to see. It's a paper fraud. They could trace it. So the honest thing to do is to disclose your income and assets, and if you are of the threshold to get benefits, you'll get it, except you may have to pay part of the premium.
Okay.
So that's the best thing. Moving on, if you receive a letter and you're the target of an investigation, you should seek counsel. There's no question about it, because the exposure is real. And these cases aren't a he said, she said case about a fight or something. They're documented paper trails that a DA can follow all the way. So they're strong cases to begin with.
Do you ever get a call on the phone from the investigators, or do you have to go down there?
Generally, they'll send a letter, certified mail, to your house, and come to your house sometimes to hand deliver.
Oh, they may actually come to your house?
Yeah, because they want to see who answers the door. They want to see if your car is parked out there. They want to see anything that would tie you to the fraud.
The medical providers themselves, because I know this is a
Sure.
big issue, the doctors, how are they trying to get over on the system? Let's give me an example of what a doctor does.
So, for example, we've represented a number of clinics that will incentivize patients to come in and then bill them for phantom services. So, for example, you receive Medicaid, you already are at a low income threshold, so you don't have much money. If a runner from a clinic entices you to come in and says, listen, we're going to give you $200 cash, that's a lot of money to you. They'll bring you in as a patient, you may not be treated at all, and they'll bill $5,000 worth of Medicaid services.
And how do they find that out?
Well, how does the government find it
out?
out?
How does HRA
Because
find it out?
there's audits. There's audits of all medical providers who receive Medicare and Medicaid, so they could see if these are particular realistic things. And again, they have algorithms to test whether this makes sense or not.
Gotcha. All right, now where do we find you, by the way?
So our main office is actually on the same block as HRA. It's 100 Church Street on the 8th floor. And then we have a satellite office in Brooklyn and Queens.
All right, and you'll come back and let us
I'd
know.
love to come back anytime.
Let us know how it's progressing in New York.
Absolutely.
All right. Although, well, that's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us, and of course you, the viewers, for watching. If you missed any part of today's show, be sure to check it out at www.bronxnet.tv. Also remember, if there's a legal issue or topic you'd like to see on a future edition of Today's Verdict, feel free to contact me at davidlesch@bronxnet.org or tweet us at Today's Verdict, and make sure to hashtag #AskToday'sVerdict. From myself and all of us at Today's Verdict, always remember, know your rights, know your issues, reach a verdict. We'll see you next time.